Hey guys, I want to make a video about workplace accidents, and I just want to share some experience with you all. I'm going to go through my 3 worst workplace accidents that I've had, and hopefully through my experience, maybe you can learn something or at least get a little bit of entertainment. And you guys coming into the trade, doing electrical work or instrumentation work, controls work, it's all relatively dangerous, and you just got to be on your P's and Q's. Big lesson I learned is that if you're not sure, proceed with caution. And I actually do that. Anyone who works with me knows I'm a little bit extra safety cautious, and this is just because I've been through some pretty bad accidents. And 2 of these are pretty shocking, to say the least. The first story is something we'll call the gunshot. Now, it wasn't an actual gunshot, but to me it kind of seemed like it. I was working at my water plant down in Florida, and I was pretty new tech at the time. I was tasked with rebuilding all the panels and rewiring them, more or less. So we had all these remote stations that ran off radio telemetry. And so yeah, it was pretty simple. It was a lift station, so there'd be a pump underground. And it would, once the sewage got up real high, it would start pumping. And once it got down low, it would stop pumping. And then we had a little radio telemetry box in there that would communicate back to our main plant. And those little radio telemetry boxes had 120 volts through them. And honestly, I used to get zapped all the time. Those little radio boxes didn't really have much room to work. So I don't know. It's kind of crazy now looking back on it, but I would just let myself get zapped pretty often. I mean, we're talking, I would say north of 20 times I got zapped at that job. But anyways, those aren't the stories that I'm talking about. This remote lift station was really old. All right. And at this point I had gone through and I was basically refurbing all these panels because most of them didn't really work right. Some of the alarms were just wired incorrectly, or, they're just limping along. Some of the boxes weren't communicating, whatever. So I had like 50 boxes I had to rewire. And at this point I'd done a few of them. So I kind of knew what I was doing. Still pretty new to the trade, still going to school, but I was getting there. Anyway, so I go in this box and I start poking my meter around on the inside of it. And all the controls are wired for 270 volts. So these are 480 panels. So you got 3-phase 480 coming in. So if you measure between 2 of the phases, you get 480 volts AC. And then so what they do is they take that 480 volts and they run it down in a step-down transformer and turn it into 120 volts AC. And we would use that to control, turn on contactors, send alarms, things like that. Every single panel I worked at that on those remote lift stations was 120 volts AC, but this one wasn't. It was running 270. So I'm like, oh man, this is weird. I never seen this before. So I start, poking around in the panel. I'm making sure. I'm like, okay, is the contactor running 280 volts AC? Okay, are we running 280 volts through the floats? And I'm poking around. And I mean, to give you guys a visual, this is a pretty big panel with just a bunch of relays, no PLC, and it's all old and dirty, and there's things are wire nutted, and you can tell things have been taken out and different things have been put in. I mean, the whole thing is just patched together with a Band-Aid. And what really was scary to me is there was this one terminal block right in the middle of the panel. And when I looked close at it, I saw it was a different style of terminal block that I'd ever worked on. It wasn't one of the nice snap-in ones or even just like the standard, ones that you snap onto a DIN rail. I mean, this thing was like, it looked cheap. It's a little white one and it was just, it had self-tapping screws bolting it to the back plane, to the aluminum plate on the back of the panel. And it was falling apart. I could see it was old and discolored and cracking. So I was looking in this panel and I seen it was all cracked, the terminal block. And I was still testing, looking for 270. And this is the mistake I made. Once I saw that 270, I should have turned the power off and just looked at it and figured it out. But I was young, I was ambitious, I wanted to get the job done. So I was just poking around like a madman. Thank God by this time I had been zapped by 120 a bunch of times. And I knew that 270 was pretty bad. So I put my leathers on, my leather gloves, and that was it. Anyway, so I poke at that old terminal block. It was all cracked. And lo and behold, I accidentally shorted it out. So the metal on the terminal block with the plastic that was supposed to be around it that broke off probably sometime in the 1990s. That touched my lead, and the tip of my lead kissed the back of that metal backplane. And immediately, that 270 volts had a route to escape the ground, and it went through my meter lead right into the backplane, instantly melted my meter lead, and blew a hole in the backplane that big. And it sounded and it felt like a gunshot, like a 40 cal going off right in my hands. Big, I shouldn't say big, but a small little fireball, like a quarter stick of dynamite. Boom! Blew up right in front of me, inches away from my hands. Thank God I was wearing my leathers, or I would have definitely had third-degree burns all over my hands. I wish I still had the lead to show you guys, but the thing melted, and it was at a 90-degree angle after that. And that was my first, let's say, my first scary accident, the gunshot. So the worst accident I ever had was actually when I was working at this water plant. I'd been there for about 2.5 years at this point, and I'd actually already put in my 2 weeks notice. And at this point, I was kind of past the phase where I would just get zapped all the time, and I was actually pretty confident in my skill set. I'd already rewired all the panels that needed rewiring. Everything was communicating perfectly. All the alarm signals worked on these remote stations. Things were flowing, and it was just about maintaining things at this point. So it's like over a year after the gunshot incident, and I'm at this panel, and I could probably find it on Google Maps, show you guys a picture of it. It's like a beautiful panel in a beautiful neighborhood. You got to understand, I was down in Florida, and parts of the areas that I serviced were basically the hood, the ghetto, and parts of it was where all the rich people lived and people came to vacation. And this lift station was where all the rich, famous people vacation. And this one pumping station provided all the sewage off that whole island, and it brought it back underground, back to the mainland. But anyways, before I started at this plant, there was actually a pretty ominous foreshadowing. Someone working on this lift station, they're running it under portable generator power, and a guy came out to service the generator, and like a month before I started there, he actually made a mistake and something blew up in his face, and he was in the hospital for a while. I mean, I saw a picture of his hat. It burned his hat off his head. I didn't see a picture of his face. Some of the guys there said they thought he was dead, but then we found out that he wasn't dead. It was a whole thing. I'm glad I wasn't there for it. Anyway, so this is like a couple of years after that. So I go in, and the weird thing about this panel is that usually when you have 483 phase, a couple circuit breakers feeding multiple pumps, usually the circuit breakers for the pumps are smaller than the main power feed circuit breaker coming in. So that main power comes in, and you turn off that top circuit breaker, and that will kill that whole panel, and then you have control. You don't let anyone touch that. You're in the panel. You throw a lock on there if you can, depending on your level of safety or whatever. But in this panel, they had 4 identical 3-phase breakers. They had 4 circuit breakers. The first one was like, 200 amps. And then the other 3 were like 50 or something like that. Or maybe it was a 100 amp breaker and then 3 30s. So you had the main, and then right next to it, pump 1, pump 2, pump 3, right? So anyways, I'm like a week from quitting this job and moving back to Ohio. I'm in Florida, I'm moving to Ohio. And I turn off that main breaker, right? I'm working, I'm poking around in that panel. If I remember correctly, I think one of the pumps kept tripping. So I'm checking the circuit breaker, the big one, to see like if the power's coming in right. And so I stick my hand in there, and next thing I know, I'm just like on a different planet. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I'm just completely, out of my mind. I literally have no idea what's going on, and I'm just frozen, right? And I remember all I could do was let out this crazy loud howl. What had happened was I actually, for whatever reason, didn't turn off the power. I think I might have just turned off pump 1 and then stuck my hand right on top of the pump 2 circuit breaker. And that 480 volts went through my hand, or maybe I caught 270 and it went through my body. I honestly have no idea what happened. But I screamed the loudest scream I've ever screamed in my whole life. And for 1 or 2 seconds, I had no idea where I was. It was like I became a different person. Like I was catapulted into a different dimension. And that was the most unnerving accident that I ever had because it scared me. I didn't even know I was getting shocked, but getting 120 volt shock is like nothing to me. Like it kind of wakes me up, gives me the jitters, but that like legitimately scared the heck out of me. And I was getting 480 volts, and I definitely could have died from that. And what's cool was the guy that was working with me, who we never really got along. As soon as he heard me scream, he put his hand right on my chest and pushed me out of the panel, saving my life. I think I was able to get off the buzz right before he did that. I'm not really even sure. Again, I don't really know what happened. All I know is I got 480 volts, and it happened because I was being careless, because I was comfortable, and I've been doing it a while. Use your locks, lock stuff out. Don't be distracted and work with 480. 480 will take your life quick. I'm going to call this story the generator. The story about how I almost lost my life working with the generator. And I think the moral of this one is to not listen to other people if you don't agree, and it's something that can affect you directly. It can affect your safety. So I was told to plug in a portable generator, like on a trailer. And I was supposed to hardwire this generator straight into a submersible underground well motor. So we got these well motor cables coming up above ground, and someone had uninstalled them from the control panel. And I was instructed to go over there, and there's a portable generator feeding 40 volts at 200 amps. And I was instructed to just splice those three phases coming out of the generator directly into the well motor. Again, it's like 100 feet underground. It pumps water out. And the reasoning is that we just run that well all the time. We just need it on all the time. And we don't need it. We'll turn off. We'll have someone go over and, turn off the generator. So I was like, oh, that's pretty strange to not really be able to control it. You can't monitor it remotely. There's no way to, trip the motor if it's an overload other than the 200 amp generator breaker. I mean, the whole thing about it was really weird. But anyways, so I was like, all right, I had a weird feeling going into it, but I did it anyway. So I drove over there in my little work truck, and another guy came with me who I didn't really trust this guy that much. Liked him, didn't trust him. So anyways, the generator's running, but the circuit breaker's off. I got these things called Polaris taps, and I'm going to use a Polaris type taps to just basically splice these two big ass wires together. So again, the generator's running. So I go and I make sure the circuit breaker's off on the generator, and I walk around the back side of the generator. So I'm away from the side of the generator where the circuit breaker is. So the generator's here and the circuit breaker's on this side. I'm standing behind the generator, and I'm using Allen keys to snug down these Polaris taps. So I'm holding all the wires in my hand, and I'm, putting one side in, and I'm jamming that in, and I'm splicing like that. I'm putting these taps on. And the idea was I'm going to put these taps on, and then when I'm done, I'll put a bunch of splicing tape around them and just tape the heck out of them, make them waterproof. But the mistake I made is this generator is still running with the circuit breaker turned off, and I don't have a visual on the circuit breaker, and I don't have a lock on the circuit breaker. I'm just trusting that no one would just come over and turn on the circuit breaker. Well, I guess I'm the crazy one for thinking that no one would do that. Lo and behold, my boss comes over. I mean, he's with me, he's talking. And as he sees me doing this, he walks around to the other side of the generator, and I hear a loud pop, and I freeze. And I slowly just set the wires down, and I walk over there. And this guy had turned on that 200 amp 483 phase breaker, and I was holding the wires in my hand. Bare wires, unstripped. Bare wires, there's 3 of them coming off that generator. And so I believe what happened is I got charged at 280 volts when he did that. If one of my hands was touching one of those other wires when he turned that on, 480 volts would have traveled through my body, and I most likely would have died instantly. I didn't have any PPE on other than my glasses. I mean, that's on me. I was young. I don't do any of this. I don't work like this anymore. I'm safe now. I learned my lessons. But at 26 years old, 1 year into my career, I could have very easily died that day. By the grace of God, I didn't. I believe I was charged at 270 volts, and just because I wasn't touching anything metal, and I had good boots on. I wasn't standing in water. I believe that saved my life. So there you have it. Those are 3 scary accidents that I've been through. Entertainment purposes only. I promise you I don't work like that at all anymore. I'm the first guy, and everyone will tell you I'm the first guy to stop work. If you don't feel safe, just stop. Take a break, take a breather. Don't do dangerous stuff when you're tired, exhausted, stressed out, or angry. And yeah, best of luck to you all. Thanks for checking out the channel.